Let's get it done.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're going to be talking about Avatar: Way of the Water. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, tech and game reviews, nothing would help the channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Avatar: Way of the Water was released on December 16, 2022. It is the sequel to Avatar, the highest grossing film of all time, and is again directed by James Cameron. And this is a film that's been 13 years in the making for all of its fans. And this video is going to be more of like my thoughts on the film. It's going to be kind of a spoiler review. I'm just going to kind of be bouncing it around, giving you my thoughts on the film, the first film, where I think Avatar is hanging. So it's not going to be your standard review. I just kind of want to talk about Avatar and James Cameron and what this film actually means to the film industry in general. So if you're familiar with the channel, you know that Matt and I are both huge fans of The Terminator. It's both of our favorite films ever made, and that film was directed by James Cameron. That was his second film of all time after Piranha 2. It is pretty much his first film because he's disowned Piranha 2 at this point. I believe he was fired from that movie, so that's not really his movie. So The Terminator is really where the world was introduced to James Cameron. And from there, he made Aliens, which is considered one of the greatest sequels of all time. And then he made his own sequel to his own film in Terminator 2, which is also considered one of the greatest sequels of all time. And he's made other great films, such as The Abyss and True Lies. And then in 1997, James Cameron was shot to superstardom. He became probably the most famous director on the planet when he directed, at the time, the highest grossing film of all time in Titanic. And he actually won the Academy Award for Best Director that year.
I'm the king of the world!
As he says, he was on top of the world in 1997. And since 1997, all we have received from James Cameron as far as directing goes, because there's been some documentaries, is Avatar and Avatar: Way of the Water. And in 2009, I could not wait to see James Cameron's Avatar. That was probably the movie I was most anticipating that year. It came out in December of 2009. I was a senior in high school. This is back when movies came out at midnight for a midnight release. They came out that day. There was no 3, 5, 7 o'clock screenings on a Thursday night. No, you went there at Thursday night for a midnight screening, and I sat down and I watched Avatar. And I walked out of that theater just extremely disappointed. I did not like the story at all. Now, the visuals were stunning. They did. They blew me away. I extremely impressed with the 3D technology and where they were going with it. I thought it was one of the best looking films I'd ever seen. But the story just, even 17-year-old John just really was not blown away by that story. By that point, I had already seen Pocahontas and Dances with Wolves, and it was pretty much the same story of a soldier coming in, mingling with the indigenous people, and finding out that the way that they live fits more with the way he lives, and he doesn't want to be part of this capitalist society that is trying to, how America was discovered and how we took America from the Native Americans and we used it for our own personal gain. And that's what this film is showing, how we were going there for the unobtainium and how we went there to steal from the indigenous people of Pandora, the Na'vi. That movie just, I had seen it before, and the acting was just not great. And I love Zoe Saldana. I think she's awesome, but Sam Worthington is just not a leading man. And in 2009, they were really pushing that. The year before that, he was also the star of Terminator Salvation, so pretty ironic. He worked on Terminator Salvation with McG, which is a franchise created by James Cameron, and James Cameron brought him on for this. They were really pushing Sam Worthington in 2009, and this man is just not a leading man. He's not that great of an actor. His line delivery has never impressed me. He has one gear, and that gear is just not great, and I really didn't enjoy that movie at all, and I walked out of it just extremely disappointed. I'd only seen the movie now 2 more times since that, and my feelings have not changed on it. It's still a good-looking movie, although now in 2022, the special effects don't hold up as well, but that's to be expected with all movies with special effects. As time goes on, CGI and any kind of computer-generated imagery is just not going to look as good. It's going to age way worse than any sort of practical effects. That's why you can watch movies from the 70s and 80s and they still look pretty good because they use real effects and the actors are interacting with real stuff. And that's something I feel like since the late 90s we've kind of lost. And I just felt like Avatar was just a movie that was really a beautiful tech demo that had an average at best story that I just had no connection to. I had no connection to any of the characters. So when Avatar 2 was announced many, many moons ago, I was not looking forward to it. And since then, James Cameron has basically put all his eggs in this basket, and he's saying he's making Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how 2 and 3 go. And I was just not excited for that. It's just, this is not my franchise. I'm not excited for these characters and seeing where they go. But I held out hope. I went to the theater on Friday. I saw this movie in a Dolby Cinema, which is the way they want you to see this movie. They want you to go to a Dolby Cinema with that dual lens technology, because this movie has variable frame rate, new 3D technology, it has 4K, Ultra HD, HDR, so you're going to want to see this in the highest quality theater ever, and they recommend you seeing it in a Dolby theater, and I saw it in that, and I walked out of that theater feeling just like I did when I saw the first Avatar. I was pretty disappointed by the movie overall. It felt like a 3-hour and 12-minute tech demo. This is where the movies are going. James Cameron knocked it out of the park as far as visuals go. That variable frame rate is unbelievable. Now, he's not the first person to do this. The Hobbit films, which a lot of people I know didn't appreciate it then, and then more recently, Ang Lee did it with Gemini Man, which I thought is beautiful, but that movie, again, the same thing, is just not a good movie. But again, it looked gorgeous. I show people Gemini Man all the time just so they could see that frame rate and what it actually does for film. And this movie has a variable frame rate, so it does bounce between, I believe, 24 frames per second and up to 48 frames per second. And you can almost see when they do that because it does become clearer, but it also could be a little jarring. And I feel like for a lot of people, it might throw them off if this is something that you're not used to, if you're not a gamer, because video game players have been used to variable frame rates up to 144 for a very long time. And for film goers, we're very used to 24 frames per second. That's been the standard for almost forever. And when you mess around with that, it really does throw people off at first, but then your eyes do adjust to it and it does become beautiful. And this movie, that is the shining star of it, is how gorgeous it looks. I think it's a phenomenal looking movie. I hope that more companies are able to actually take the technology that James Cameron has created and had at his disposal to make more movies, because this does not look like an MCU movie or a DC movie. This looks way better than both of those. Unfortunately, those people working on that CGI have a lot more crunch time than what they had to work with here. I believe that production on this started in 2017, so they had 5 years to work on this, where Marvel has to put out 2-3 movies a year, a couple shows, so those studios are really being pushed to the limit, and that's probably the main reason why that CGI hasn't looked that good over the years, while this team had plenty of time to work on it, work with new technology, make it perfect. Although I do have to admit that there was a couple scenes with some helicopters in this movie that just don't look good, and I don't know why, but those stood out to me. Maybe it was my eyes adjusting to the variable frame rate, but it looked pretty ugly to me, and I was very surprised that that slipped in, but again, it could just be me. Other than that, that beautiful movie, I mean, it looked gorgeous. The water shots and the whole second act, it's just incredible. It really was. And because of how stunning the visuals are, all I needed was a pretty good story for me to say that this movie is worth seeing in theaters, and that's pretty much what I'm going to say here. I thought that the story was good enough. It's better than the first movie. You get Sam Worthington back in the lead role, and it's been quite some time. At this point now, he has 3 kids of his own. He's adopted 2. Sorry about that. The camera cut out right as I was about to talk about Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang's character. So Sigourney Weaver actually is in this movie. She plays her old self from the original, but she actually had the Immaculate Conception happen to her, so she had a child between movies who is also being raised by Sam Worthington's character and Zoe Saldana's character as their adopted child. And they also adopted another child. Stephen Lang's character apparently knocked someone up on the army base there on Pandora, and he had a child, and you can't take children that young back to Earth because of the incubation period, I guess. So Sam Worthington's family adopted him as well. He's pretty much like a little Tarzan boy. Whatever that one kid was from the Wild Thornberrys, where the family took him in as one of their own, and even though he's human, they kind of still treat him as one of his kids, even though obviously he's Stephen Lang's character's kid, so his dad was a real piece of shit. And that's another aspect of this movie, is how Stephen Lang's character is brought back into the movie somehow as the main antagonist with his grunts from the original one, I guess. Well, I guess there might be new grunts, but one of these grunts actually happens to have sunglasses on his head. So somewhere on Pandora, there is either an Oakley or a Ray-Ban shop where you can get huge American-branded sunglasses. So, you know, that's one good thing about this. Those 2 characters, both Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang, felt very shoehorned into the story, very much like Star Wars-esque or even MCU-esque, where they just for some reason can't kill off characters and they have to find a way to bring them back into the story. And that's exactly what they did here, is they found a way to bring them back into the story. And it looks like Sigourney Weaver's character, because I thought her acting was the best. She has to play a teenage version of herself, like a much younger version, about 15 years old. And her character was probably the most interesting of the entire story. I thought they fleshed that out pretty well, and that's what sets up, I think, Avatar 3. So that was unique, but it just felt so shoehorned in, even if the acting is done. It just felt like, yeah, we have to get here and, you know, get there any way you possibly can. Put Stephen Lang's conscience into this Avatar, and I guess people will be on board. But it didn't really work for me. When they're giving the exposition of Stephen Lang and why his character is able to transfer conscience into an avatar, even though he does say it's a different character, his character is dead from the first one, but all his memories and everything are inserted into this avatar's brain, so it's basically him. But in this video where we're getting the exposition, that's the only time we see Giovanni Ribisi's character from the first one, which was disappointing that he didn't come back, because I really enjoyed his character. But we do get some new additions to the cast, such as Edie Falco, which I thought was really awesome, from Goodfellas. And The Sopranos. And I guess they were trying to pay homage to Aliens, because the whole movie, or at least every time we pretty much see her, she's in like a mech suit and drinking coffee. So it's really funny that she's wearing like a mech suit from Aliens, and she's using the hands to drink coffee. And every time we see her, she's drinking coffee. So I thought that was probably one of my favorite little Easter eggs that was put in this movie, because I had no idea that Edie Falco was even in this movie. And it was cool seeing her do this role, because I've never seen her do a role like this before. And she was perfect in that, so I thought she had a lot of fun. Even though she said in a recent interview that she filmed this 4 years ago, she thought the movie had already come out and bombed, because she didn't even realize. Now, she might have been kidding when she said that, but because who doesn't realize that Avatar 2 isn't out? But I thought that was pretty funny that she filmed this so long ago. And then another character that's put in this movie is Kate Winslet's character. She is I guess the queen of the Water People's tribe. I felt like they just wasted her in this too, because like there's half the time you don't even realize that's Kate Winslet, and that's because they're all in this big blue getup and everything like that, and it's really hard to portray emotions and everything on their face and figure out who the actors are that are portraying them. Obviously, we know Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana's character, but we're introduced to a lot of new characters in this movie, all their kids, the other tribe's kids, pretty much the entire other tribe. We get a lot of new additions, and you know, it's just very hard to tell who is who, what actor is playing what. So that just really disappointed me with the story. And then the dialogue that is written, I mean, even Kate Winslet, and this was probably my favorite scene in the movie, because there is a whale, or I don't know what the exact name of it, but it's pretty much a whale, and they are a very advanced species. They're actually more advanced, I believe, that they said, than humans and of the Na'vi. You know, they have this beautiful moment where unfortunately these two very stereotypical villains, very movie cliche villains, kill a whale. And this whale actually has a certain, I guess, brain juice that actually can make humans immortal. They don't die, or they at least don't age. And they're only selling that, which I believe this movie is 100 years in the future, as far as Earth time goes, and they're only selling that for $80 million. That doesn't add up. If something made human beings immortal, it's going to cost more than $80 million for one vial of it. I'm pretty sure that's going into the billions. But that's just me. That's another complaint I have about this movie. But Kate Winslet, when this whale dies, who she has this really big, huge connection with, you know, the lines she's delivering kind of just immediately take you out, because they come off super cheesy. And I love super cheesy. You give me a big slice of American cheese on any movie, I'm usually pretty good with that. But the tonal shifts in this, it just doesn't fit in with the emotional moment that they're trying to go for. There's one emotional moment towards the end of the movie that did work for me, and the entire third act in general really did work for me. I felt like the first act, we have to just tell the story that we have to tell to get to where we are going for this movie, and I feel like, you know, 13 years, we have to put that in here. Then the second act really slows down, and yeah, you get to take in the beauty of the world, but it's very slowly paced. And then for like, I guess the last hour and a half, the third act, that's where James Cameron shines. That's where you see the Terminator 2, True Lies director, just showing off how he could still shoot action. And I was really into it. And because for really, other than the second act, I was never really too bored in this movie, because, again, it looked gorgeous. And if you're going to see this movie, you're going to want to see it on the biggest, baddest screen possible, at least in Dolby Cinemas or at IMAX. And that's where you're going to get the most out of this movie. Now, we're a physical media channel, and I'm very curious about what this 4K is going to look like. Is it going to have the variable frame rate on it? With the HDR, I'm sure it's going to have Dolby Vision, and I really can't wait to see what it looks like from the visual standpoint. But I'm not looking forward to watching this movie from a story standpoint, really, ever again. I feel like it's a very basic, cliche, something you've seen before type of movie, with characters that I personally am not invested in. Now, if you're invested in these characters, this movie is going to work tenfold for you. You're going to love this movie because obviously Avatar has a ton of fans. And those fans are hopefully going to come out in droves because this has not been a great year for cinemas as far as people going to the movies. And they obviously can't hit the highs of the highest grossing movie of all time, like the original Avatar. But you really hope that it comes close. Even for a movie that I don't really love, I still want to see it succeed because I really want people still to go to the movies. I don't want to see movie theaters go out of business, but they need big tentpole movies like this because unfortunately, even though for me, it's very disappointing that a bunch of small, middle-of-the-pack movies with like a $10 to $20 million budget just don't get people out to theaters anymore. Those movies really get sent to Netflix, Hulu, or Prime Video nowadays, and that's very disappointing, but I still love going to the theaters. I still love going and sitting in my chair and just turning the world off for 2 to 3 hours and watching something special. And I did really still enjoy my time in the theater watching this because, again, the 3D technology was beautiful, that variable frame rate, 4K, all looked gorgeous. It's really very visually stimulating. I just wish that we would have gotten a better story. And for a movie that took 13 years to come to us, I was anticipating a better story. And it is still a better story than the first one, but it's a pretty low bar to hit in my opinion. Yeah, they hit it, but James Cameron didn't raise the bar that much as far as a storytelling standpoint goes. Visually, he really raised that bar yet again, which shouldn't be a surprise. The guy brought us T2, and really when CGI started to take off with the T1000, I guess I just wanted more from this movie. I really was hopeful. I tapered my expectations. I didn't go into this overhyped. I didn't go into this really expecting to hate it. I really just went into it hoping that this movie would wash over me. And it kind of did, but it also kind of didn't. So I can definitely recommend you see this movie. If you're gonna see this movie, if you have any interest in seeing this movie, I would recommend seeing it in a theater, in a Dolby Cinema, if it's available wherever you are. If not, try and see it in IMAX, because I don't think it's going to work in your standard theater with a regular projector. I just don't think you're going to get the same exact feeling. Now, if you're a huge fan of Avatar and you are invested in the characters from the first movie, I do think that you're also going to enjoy this more than me. And I still can recommend it from that. So what would I give this movie out of 10? I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10, which is basically a passing grade. It's something I think that you should see if you can see it, but I don't think it's going to be something that's going to go down as an all-time classic, as a benchmark for cinema, as something you're going to want to revisit year to year. I think this is something this beautiful shouldn't be this forgettable. I saw this movie on Friday, I'm filming this on Monday, and it still just does not... I hadn't thought about the movie until I sat down for this review. I had listened to a couple things about it, I read some articles about it and how its box office was doing, but really the story just didn't stick with me. I didn't have too much emotional investment in it like I really hoped I would. I went into this hoping, hey, maybe this will make my top 10 of the year. Spoiler alert, it won't. And it just left me feeling a little bit colder and disappointed than I really wanted to feel. And that really does kind of suck for me, honestly. But let me know, guys, in the comment section below. Have you seen Avatar 2: Way of the Water? What did you think of it? Am I way off base? Do you think I missed the mark on this one? Do you think I'm completely wrong? Or do you think I'm right? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And then while you're down there, guys, nothing helps out the channel more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel.